1st, and we are in Lavonia, Georgia, at the county library downtown. And I'm speaking with Irenus Sanders.
That's correct.
Did I pronounce it correctly?
Irenus Sanders.
And can you tell me a little something of your experience during the World War II era?
Well, I became 18 years old on July 20th, 1943. And on August 18th of 43, I was sworn in the United States Navy at Atlanta. And I served boot camp in Bainbridge, Maryland for 8 weeks. Following those 8 weeks, I was shipped to Little City, North Carolina's Brent base. Stayed there about 5 months and went to San Francisco, California, and served in the Fleet Post Office until the 1st of July of 44. From there I went overseas and went aboard USS LST 450 in July of 44 in Honolulu, Hawaii. After boarding this ship in 44, our first stop after we left there was in Saipan, in the Mariana Islands. And while we were there, we were under several bombing raids. We left there and went to Guam. And from Guam, we loaded up and we carried an Army outfit in the invasion of Leyte in the Philippines in October. From there, we came back to Guam, went back to the Philippines the 1st of July of 45. From there, we came back to Guam and we stayed in Guam until the invasion of Okinawa. On April 1st of 45, we invaded Okinawa. While we were there, President Franklin Roosevelt passed away. All kamikazes that the Japanese had, that was where they really turned those things loose. In Okinawa, there was more Navy personnel killed in Okinawa than Marines and Air Force all combined due to the result of these kamikazes. The Navy wanted 3 of these kamikazes brought to Pearl Harbor aboard a ship. They made it a volunteer deal. They first 10 ships they asked turned them down. We were called to quarters one afternoon about 4 o'clock, and our captain explained about the deal bringing these kamikazes back to Honolulu. And if one man didn't want to ride aboard the ship with those things, they didn't know whether they'd explode, exceed, or what would happen. If one man didn't want to ride aboard, we would bring them. If they had no objections, we'd bring them. So everybody agreed to load them up. So we brought them back to the Pearl Harbor. We got late one afternoon. The following day, I had the pleasure of being put on the gangplank. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz and his crew came aboard to inspect those things. To make a long story short, after they did, we were on our way to Hilo, which is approximately 150 miles from Honolulu. And the first atomic bomb, this was in August, was dropped. And a few days later, they dropped the other, and we was in Hilo at that time. So after the Japanese surrendered, we was loaded up, I believe they were 3rd Marines. And we went to Japan. We landed in Japan, I believe, September 3rd, 1945. We stayed there a couple of weeks and they sent us to Manila to get more reinforcements. And the hardest part of my whole service was on the way from Nagoya, Japan, to Manila, the Philippines. We went through a typhoon. one I was aboard LST, and one LST tore the bow doors off of it. They finally made it to port. When they got in, this one particular LST into Manila Bay, it was so badly torn, they carried it out to sea and sunk it. There was a cruiser in that thing. I forget the name of the cruiser. It's unbelievable. The bow of the thing just broke off just like you took a torch. And a cruiser's the next thing to our battle wagon, you know. The biggest warship, and that was a battleship, and then the cruiser was next. It ripped the bow off of that thing, so. After that, we went back to Japan. And I'd had a case of tonsillitis, and they'd taken me off my ship one afternoon and put me on the USS Constellation, which was a hospital ship. They're going to remove my tonsil, and the next day or two they're going to pick me back up. So the next morning on the hospital ship, they were enlarged, so they wasn't going to take them out. They gave me an order to send to my ship to come pick me up. They were 7 miles at sea headed to San Francisco. I was transferred off of that ship that day onto another one, stayed about a week, onto another one, stayed about a week. They called me up for an interview, and they put me in the post office they opened up in Nagoya, Japan. And I was very fortunate, I think, that that really happened. I was put on a mail run aboard a train, and we traveled from one end of Japan to the other. I got to go to Tokyo, which I never would have. Got to go to Hiroshima, all those places, all the way down to the southern tip of Japan, which was Sasebo. Served there till March 22nd, 45. At that time, I had enough points to get out, and they sent me back to the state to be discharged. I received from the Navy Department 4 medals and 3 Bronze Stars, 3 different battles. And that's about the extent of my service.
It's a great deal. Where were you when the armistice with Japan was declared? Was that?
I was in Hilo, Hawaii.
Mm-hmm. And when did you get to?
That was in August. The armistice in Japan was August of 45. I left Japan in March 22nd, 46.
What did you think of Douglas MacArthur?
Well, he said, I shall return, and I was in the Philippines when he returned, but I didn't get to see him. You know, he was in the Army and I was in the Navy, but we were on the beach in Leyte when MacArthur returned in 1945. Well, all the soldiers thought he was a great man. The greatest serviceman I thought in the whole time was Admiral Nimitz. Everybody's got maybe their own opinion, but he was the man, you know, that even the Pentagon and all thought that the Japs were going to come and hit Hawaiian Islands again of the West Coast, and he said, no, Midway. And that's where they came to, and that was the turning point of the Navy battle in World War II, was that Midway battle.
Did you see Admiral Nimitz from time to time?
I met him aboard when we came to see those kamikazes and came aboard. The only time that I ever met an admiral that I knew there was an admiral.
Where were you when war was declared?
I was in high school.
And where was that?
I was in Pine View, Georgia, down in Wilcox County.
What brought you to Franklin County?
I was born and raised in Hartwell. My father passed away, my mother, when I was 3. And my older sister lived, moved to Pine View, Georgia in 39. And we stayed down there till 41. And we came back to Hartwell, our home place in Hartwell, where I was born and raised. In 52, I got married to a girl that lives here, and I moved up here. served on police force here for 19 and a half years, and sheriff's department for 6 years, 25 and a half years altogether. I was chief here for 7, and I was the deputy sheriff for 6, and 3 of those years, my last 3 were chief deputy.
And you've been retired?
Since September 1st, 88.
How did you meet your wife?
Well, a good friend of mine was going with some girls up here, and they was riding around one day, and they came to Hartland. He knew me real well, and she was there, and we just met through another friend.
Going back to World War II, were you able to send letters home?
Oh, yes.
What was that like?
Well, receiving them was the best part. A lot of times you might go quite a while. People wondered how in the world could you keep up with you, you know. Well, it's really kind of simple once you get to know the postal system. Every island has a number, FPO number so-and-so. I believe, for example, maybe Honolulu was 128. I'll just give you an example. Well, you send it to this ship just in care of, you know, FPO, San Francisco, California. They look, they got a fleet records, and they can tell you where that ship's going to be, next island it's going to be. Well, we'll say like it was in Guam, for example, after, you know, Guam was taken, and that's where the mail would go. It got to Guam. If the ship wasn't there, say we'd left and we'd gone, say, up to Saipan. Fleet records show we left here and we're going to Saipan. They'll go on there. They just follow that fleet records, run you right on down. One of the funniest things that happened while I was in the Navy, I was in the post office. The Army sends all the mail they get to the Navy, to the nearest post office. They don't have our codes. In the same way with the Navy, we get some to the Army, you know, APO. We send it to the nearest Army post office. And I was in our mail dispatch, was my part in the post office over in Nagoya, Japan. And the Army sent a bunch of mail, and I was going through it, and a letter in there to me. And it was from my brother. It was 80 miles south of where I was stationed in the Army. He was down at a little place called Kyoto. It was a shrine city. It was never bombed. So I asked my commanding officer about would be any way I could get a pass to go down to Kyoto to see my brother.
Was this after the war was over then?
Yes, this was while we were there in Nagoya. This was the first part of December of 45. And we had such a rush order, you know, mail coming in and out, you know, Christmas time. He said, let me get everything figured out. You got to catch a train here. And when it gets down there and when it leaves, it's about 4 miles to the station, depot, you know. And said, I'll get it fixed up for you. Well, he got it fixed up, and I left on the last day of December, the 31st, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And about 4:30, I was down at Kyoto. And I got to spend 3 days. 4 days, I think. 4 days with my brother. We lived in Alabama, I believe it was Southern Cal, play on rowboat. They had it on this foreign radio network, you know. It was in the morning. We were listening to hers in the morning and playing in the rowboat in Pasadena, California. But I hadn't seen him in 39 months.
Did y'all hear anything of each other during combat, during the war year?
No, he got there right after the war ended. He always told people I fought his battles.
Did he move back to Georgia after that, after the war?
Yeah, he born and raised, which he actually got killed in an automobile accident in 1972. He was 7 years older than I was. And why he got in a little late, he was married and had a family. And he worked at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, this building was bombed, but he could have got the permit, not a win, but he said, no, I'm not going to volunteer, but when they call me, I'm going. So he did.
When you came back home, was there anything that seemed like you'd been missing it? Any food? Anything else that was in particular?
No, the Navy, you don't go much lacking for food. You have everything, but you don't have nothing. So I was very fortunate. There was lost ship. Always had plenty of food. Had good medical supplies all the time. It was just fortunate that the ship I was on never did get hit. Come close, but never did get hit.
What did you feel seeing other parts of the country, like Hawaii and Oahu? And did you go to California?
Oh yeah, I stayed on Market Street 5 months. 571 Market Street, worked in the Fleet Post Office 5 months. Walked out the front door in downtown San Fran. Stayed over at Treasure Island a while. We docked over at Alameda Shipyard right out of Oakland. Went in dry dock. In fact, that's where we were when I went aboard. No. When we came back, one time we went in there just for minor repair. But Treasure Island stayed there for a while. That's where we went in port of embarkation. That's between Oakland, San Francisco, and the Bay Bridge. I believe one part that a lot of people don't think is Goat Island.
Were there any characters, people from different places, or anybody you especially remember from that time?
Oh yeah, I know quite a few. One I can live at Boston. He and I was on the same ship together. The day I went aboard this ship, he came in and said, I hear that one of you fellas, there was 12 of us, I believe. Here, one of you's from Georgia now. I am. He said, I'm from Georgia too. I said, where are you from? He said, you know where Rawson, Georgia is at? And I said, yeah. Where are you from? I said, you know where Hartwell is at? And he said, yeah. And he told me who he married, and I said, your brother-in-law, James Hawkins? Yeah. I said, you married Barrett Hawkins' daughter? Yeah. I knew some of the, his wife's folks. And I said, I even called his daddy's name. Daddy used to fight games with chickens years ago. And he seemed just like a brother. Which he's still living.
What's his name? Lindsey
Vaughn. They call him Dink. There was Broughton. He's retired. He worked down at Johnson. I believe that's where he retired from. And what that place was before Johnson. I believe it was a textile plant. He worked there for years and years.
Well, I'm going to ask you one last question, sir. If you were summing up your experiences during those years for younger people, if you were talking to high school or college age people of another generation, what would you say to them?
I would say to one, the first thing to do is an education. By all means, mess with no drugs of no kind. And always treat your fellow man like you will be treated. I don't think you can go wrong with that. If you've got an education, and your mind, and your head clear, and you treat your fellow man right, you can't go wrong.
Thanks very much for coming in and speaking today.
Thank you, sir.